comfortable. I think we're good on exposure. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Desk is a literal disaster. You can tell you've been building cameras when you've just got stuff all over your desk. Oh, yeah. Ooh, love that. Today, guys, we are talking Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K ergonomics. Roll that intro. Let's do it. Yo guys, what is going on? Jake Felzine here, back with another video, and today, as I said, we are talking about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. We need a new, Carly likes to call this camera the Black Mamba, and I think we're gonna just roll with that from now on. Maybe from here on out, we just call this camera the Black Mamba. I like it. It reminds me of Megamind, one of my favorite movies of all time, where she got it from. But anyway, today we are talking ergonomics and button layout. Now, the cool thing about this camera, guys, is that as you start to use it, which I have started to use it very heavily, as you start to use it, you will notice that a lot of these buttons are in places as if the person who designed this was thinking, hey, I want to go shoot a camera and I want to use a camera that is like designed to make it easier for me to go shoot. What? I mean, who the f would do that? No, but seriously, guys, this camera is really well designed. And we're gonna go over the button layout. So like one thing, when you start getting into cameras, a lot of times people go out and they review it, they talk about whether it's usable or not, and then that's about it. That's all they talk about. They wanna talk about the image, they wanna show you sample footage, which is important, but really it's important to, when you pick up the camera, be able to just have the buttons work for you, have the layout work for you, have the menu make a lot of sense. And we're gonna go over that today. I will do close-up shots overlaid to show you all of the buttons that I'm talking about, but I'm gonna hold this for reference just so I can keep my mind straight on what we're chatting about. But let's just get right on into it. Okay, so we're gonna start here on the top, obviously, and of course, the first and most important button is the record button. This camera, oddly enough, has two of them. So you've got the one right here on the top, and then there's actually one as if you were to maybe like vlog with this camera. You can press it with your thumb, which is kind of madness, right? This is a huge camera depending on how you rig it out. But anyway, it does have two record buttons, kind of the thumb vlogging button and then the regular button. Do exactly what you would expect. They press record on the camera. Moving on over to the right, there is a small photography camera button. To be honest with you guys, I haven't even pressed it yet because why would you take pictures with a cinema camera? And Blackmagic's not shy. You know, they don't advertise that their photos are great. This is a cinema camera. I haven't even used it. All right, let's scoot back just a little bit. Let's talk about the three next buttons. You've got your ISO, your shutter speed, and your white balance all within pointer finger distance, right? So I'm here, I can record. I can just come right up here to my three main exposure buttons. Very standard, a lot of cameras do this. Nothing mind-blowing here, but it is great to see them so close and easy to press. Which leads us right into the sort of dial in the front. Listen to that. Gotta love these little dials, these little click dials. So anytime on the menu system on this awesome, amazing, big 1080p monitor on the back of this camera, anytime you click those buttons, you can then adjust the exposure setting with that front dial. By default, that front dial is going to adjust the aperture, but then when you select these other ones, it'll pop up on here and you can adjust that value. And of course, you can also adjust it on the touch screen, but we'll get to that. The cool thing too about this iris button is as you adjust it, when you get to the point that you like, it actually has a little click feature so that you can click and then you're done. It resets the menu. You're no longer adjusting whatever exposure you were adjusting. Great. All right, and let's just round out the rest of the top of this camera. Of course, we've got our power switch, which is very like 80s feeling in the way that it switches on, but I don't know, I like it. It's very manual, very analog, which I'm a big fan of. Flick it on, flicks the camera on, and let's just show it. We've got a pretty quick start time with this camera. Fire it on, and within a couple of seconds, you are good to go. Moving over to the right, up here on the top, we have three completely customizable, programmable function buttons. By default, I believe the far left with the one dot comes with the false color, which turns on. The middle one by default comes as the LUT applier, so you can preload LUTs or use the LUT that just comes by default in this camera. And then the third one turns on and off these sort of banding grid lines. And again, you guys can customize them to whatever you want, all in the menu system, but very cool that it comes with 3 programmable function buttons. And again, they're very, very accessible, super easy to press any of those buttons if and when you need to. All right, we're gonna switch this baby off and we're going to then move to the back of the camera. So moving on to the back of the camera, we have some really awesome and really intuitive buttons. Again, so far everything's been pretty standard, but it's all very close, very easy to that right hand, and you can just adjust whatever you need to adjust all with one hand. Well, it gets even better because this camera is nice and big. Your thumb placement fits nicely with this next row of buttons, which is what we're going to talk about next. The topmost button is one that I wasn't sure I was going to use very much, and the more and more I use this camera, it's kind of nice just to be able to have it as an option. Looks like sort of the little aperture dials, and that's exactly what it is, guys. When you press that button up top, if you're using a native lens, the aperture will actually shrink or grow to try to auto expose your camera. So the camera will look at the image, and based on whether it's underexposed or overexposed, it will adjust the aperture to do that automatically. All it's doing is speeding up my run and gun workflow, which I appreciate. Okay, and the button underneath that one is an interesting one as well. This is your autofocus button, except for that this camera has no autofocus, but all it does is it's sort of a tap to focus button. So again, the focus in this camera really sucks. It's all contrast based. It's nothing pretty, but kind of like the button above it, if I'm running and gunning and I want to quickly change my focus, whether it's tap or that, and I'm not wanting to use the manual focus, I want something faster, all I have to do is press that. It's going to autofocus on whatever's in the middle, and then it just locks the focus there, and you're good to go. Although it's maybe not the most fitting for this video, I am gonna throw in one additional tidbit. When I bought this camera, guys, I thought there was no way to change the focus automatically while you're recording. Well, that's a myth. If you're using native lenses like Panasonic lenses or other Micro Four Third lenses, with the Micro Four Third mount, if you are recording and you touch the screen or you press that focus button, it will try to refocus even while you're recording. You don't always have to do manual focus. The focus on this camera sucks. You're going to be using manual focus all the time. That's what you do as a movie filmmaker or cinematographer. That's the de facto standard. So of course you're going to be doing a ton of manual focus with this camera. But again, if you're a movie maker, you're used to that. That's what you want, and you're not expecting great autofocus necessarily out of this camera. Okay, and let's go down to the button below. Now, this one really confused me, and it took me a bit to set up. We're gonna go over it, but this is the HFR, or high frame rate button. Now, this button is amazing once you know how to use it. If you're shooting in your standard 24p, 4K, and you wanna press this button, what it'll do is it'll automatically bump you up to 60 frames per second, 4K, raw, which is just crazy. If you want to shoot in the 120 frames per second that this camera does provide, you have to go in and do a little bit of setting tweaking. So I'm going to explain that right now just because this is kind of how I've used this part of the menu. Most of the time when I'm running around shooting 24p, then I want to go to slow motion. 60 frames is good enough. Everyone loves 120. Everyone's obsessed with 120 or higher because of Peter McKinnon. Oh, gee, thanks, Pete. 60 frames just can't be good enough for slow motion anymore. Now, if you want to do 1080, you actually have to do a cropped sensor. So rather than using the full sensor, that's just too much information. It's too much data for the camera to process to shoot raw and 120 frames per second. So it actually has to crop. So what you have to do is go into your menu system, go to the first tab, and adjust your resolution to basically 1080p. You're gonna have to go down to 1920 by 1080p because that's when you can shoot 120 frames per second. Once you've done that, then go to your frames, adjust your frames, you go all the way up to 120, and then you can shoot 120p and you can get that Peter McKinnon slow motion. Again, it's cropped, which is kind of a bummer depending on how you look at it, but for the most part, just, you know, you can make it work. And 60p isn't cropped, so we're definitely not gonna complain. This camera is freaking BA for slow motion. But along that vein, if you are gonna do that, one thing that I have found is on the menu system, is this little thing called presets. So what I've done here, and I'll kind of show it, is I've actually done 2 setups. So if I want to film 24 and 60 frames per second, I have a setup called regular, or whatever, you can call it whatever, name it whatever you want. But then I have another setup called slow-mo. So that whole process we just talked about, when you're in the record, you've changed to HD, and then you go and you actually change your frame rate for the, off-speed frame, you can get that 120 frames. We'll then go over to your presets and do new preset, create that new preset, name it, save it, and then basically you can save that 120 frames per second as a preset. So then all you have to do is go to the menu, go to your presets, change that, and select that as your new preset. Exit out of the menu and you're back up to 120. But again, guys, depending on what you're doing, depending on your project, I like to just shoot 24p most of the time because that's kind of the movie standard. And then I'll just hit that HFR button, go up to 60p, and that's usually good enough for the stuff that I'm doing as of today with this camera. All right, guys, we spent a lot of time on that button. Let's go to the next one below it, which is simply a punch in button. All it does is it zooms in on your monitor so that maybe it's about 2 times more zoomed in. It's all digital, and mainly what you want to do there, or why you would be using that button, is to check your focus. Man, I mean, they just thought through these buttons. They're just great. They're literally just exactly what you would need as a filmmaker. It's so well thought through. All right, one more button below. We are off to the menu button, which of course, no surprise, opens the menu. With the menu button, guys, and I figured this out, there's really no way to like exit the menu on the touch screen, because you go in and you do all your little touchscreen stuff. You go in, do all your little touchscreen stuff on the menu, and then you go, oh my gosh, how do I exit it? Just hit that menu button again, and you are back to sort of the camera's field of view, seeing what you are filming. And our last and final button, but certainly a very important one, is the last one on the bottom, and that is the little play button. All this button does is it allows you to watch your footage. Another little side note gotcha that I have found is by hitting play again, it actually plays the clip and it doesn't get you back to your record view. So what you have to do is actually hit the record button. Don't worry, it's not going to start recording. It'll bring you back to that sort of live view, and then you can hit record again to start recording. And so that is how you're going to exit out of the sort of play preview part of the menu. So guys, we've been through all of the buttons. We're pumped. Everything is just so well designed. Again, the people over at Blackmagic, the super crazy smart men and women engineers, were thinking when they made this camera, and I just love it. I thought there would be such a learning curve. I thought it would be such a pain in the to learn this camera, and ultimately it's just become second nature. Everything is where it should be. Everything is really intuitive. The menu system is great. I love this camera. From an ergonomics perspective, really just hits out of the park. All right, guys, but anyway, that is all I have for you today. Hope you guys are considering buying the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, or maybe you've already bought it and you were just kind of curious to learn some stuff, which I hope you did today. So that is all I have for you guys. Hope you have a great rest of your day, morning, evening, night. Blackmagic rocks. So excited, guys. For those of you who are new around here, we will be filming a documentary with this camera coming up here in the near future, and I'm just so pumped to do it because honestly, I really just love using this camera. But that being said, guys, as always, do not forget that creativity comes from constraint, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good one. Peace.